All right, good morning, everyone. We are live. It is Wednesday, and this is a special live stream. It's been a while. I've been trying to get Coach Carson on for a while. He's a real estate investor, author, and YouTuber. So thanks for joining me today, Coach.
Oh, my pleasure, Mark. Long time coming, and I appreciate what you do, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So, audience, send in any questions you do have, but I'm going to dig into some of the questions that I have. And I want to remind everyone I'll put Coach Carson's link to his book through Amazon. And also, I will put his rental property mastery program, and we'll dig into that also because there's a lot of people in the school community also a part of that. But yeah, Coach, I met you at Michael Zuber's ORAD event, year one, and your presentation was one of my favorites, and I just loved it. And I really think that small and mighty investor mindset is what kind of attracts a lot of the ORAT community. So can you kind of maybe dig into that a little bit on where that mindset came from?
Yeah, thank you. The small money real estate investor is something that came to me by doing it the opposite way. Like it's kind of like you have to touch the fire and get burned before you actually learn something. That's at least that's the way I learned it. And my first few years in real estate, I was brand new. I was 22 years old, and I sort of borrowed goals from everybody else I heard. I'd go to a seminar, I'd read a book, and everybody was saying you should, go big, and you should buy hundreds of properties or thousands of properties, and you need to make millions of dollars. And that seemed like success at first. And I was young, and I just had to copy other people. But as I started doing that, I realized there's a cost to every business model, and going big is great in some ways. And if you want to be the biggest in the room and the biggest real estate investor, but there's also a cost to your lifestyle. And at least for me, your relationships and your health. And so I tried to find a different kind of model for myself and try to model other. So I found people like John Shaw building wealth one house at a time, and became friends with, the one rental at a time community, of course. And there's a way to invest in real estate that is kind of has your life first and the real estate investing second. And the real estate investing is a tool and the money is a tool. But what really matters is what matters to you. Like, what do you want to do this for? And why are you, and so for me, for example, traveling with my wife and my family and living in other places was like a huge goal of ours. And so we built our real estate investing business around being able to live in another country for a year or 17 months and still have the real estate investing pay for that, and not take up every hour of our day. And for me, that was having the smallest real estate investing business possible. That doesn't mean it can't get big, over time, but not trying to be the biggest possible, trying to be like the smallest possible that actually meets your goals. That's the goal, instead of trying to get 10x and do everything else you hear Grant Cardone and everybody else on the internet telling you to do.
I kind of want to dig into what you kind of mentioned about living abroad with your family. I think that story is what really interested me also when I followed you on YouTube. So can you kind of touch on that and maybe how did that become part of the vision, like traveling and living abroad?
It was actually the first date with my wife. We were like hiking in the woods, and she was like, I teach Spanish, or she teaches Spanish. And she was just talking about all these trips she wanted to do and she had done in Latin America. And I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, hey, how about we do this together? Kind of as a joke. And we ended up getting married. And that was kind of one of our dreams, was to do that. And having kids too. She's a language teacher, and I really like languages. And it was really interesting to think about, could we have our kids live abroad and learn Spanish in this case when they're really young, when you can actually like absorb more of the language and get more of the accent. And so it was sort of it was just our personal little thing. It was fun, which I think is the main thing. Like, everybody's got their dream. That it's not for everyone. It's not traveling and living abroad. Some people want to build something in their community. Some people want to volunteer more. I mean, so there's so many great dreams that people have. That was our dream. And so it was, it just manifested itself. We did a little bit of a trip before we had kids for well, not a little trip. It was 4 months in 2009, right in the depths of the recession. And we figured out a way to systematize our business a little bit. We weren't financially independent, but we just saved up enough money in 2009, and we just took off with our backpacks, and we went to Spain for a little bit. We lived in Peru for a month and a half, and it was just amazing. Like, it was like a life-changing trip for me, where I just kind of stepped away from my business. And I was a type A, and I still am in many ways, go, 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 goals, goals, goals. I really needed that. It was like medicine for my soul to actually like detach myself from my day-to-day life. And it helped me think about some things. It helped me kind of get some perspective. And I actually had a moment, we were sitting in Spain, this little town called Cadaqués. It's on the coast of Spain. It's where Salvador Dali, the famous painter, surrealist painter, did all his paintings out there. It's this weird kind of rocky Mediterranean coast. I just remember sitting there for like 4 or 5 hours reading a book with my wife, and we watched the sunset. And as the sun was setting, there's this like huge shooting star like shot across the sky, like green. I'm like, that, like, I'm having a moment here. Like, what is this? And I felt like the tension that I'd had for those last 4 or 5 years just kind of release. And it was a moment that just kind of taught me that, like, I need to like chill out a little bit sometimes. I need to have this kind of seasons of my life where you work hard and then you take it easy for a little bit, and you work hard and take it easy. And that's been the best business decision ever made, was to start building these seasons of taking it easy into my life. It's been amazing. It's been amazing for a whole lot of reasons, but studying abroad or traveling abroad and living abroad for me has kind of been the way to do that.
Before we move on, I just want to remind everyone this is the book right here that's kind of a lot of us have read in the One Rental at a Time community, and it's feel that it's a important book in our journey. And I will put the link for Amazon to go pick up that book. But there is a big question from Frank Old Guy REI. The one question I think a lot of us are wondering is, will you be at the Michael Zuber event for year 3?
Oh, good question. Zuber and I've talked about it, and I keep telling him, like, man, that's too far in advance for me to plan, Michael. But thank you for asking and giving the feedback. Like, I would like, I've got an event that I'm doing myself in January, and it's kind of like right around there. But if Zuber still wants me to and keeps bugging me, it could still be on the table. So
Or
it's just, I'll give you some perspective here. If there's one event I would want to go to, like that event is amazing, and I love it. And I feel like so much connection with the people all of you who went. It's just getting harder and harder. My daughters are both in like a period of their life where they have sports events and things that I've taken them to, and it's like there's that little window of time where if I leave for a week or a weekend and miss it, it's just there's a higher bar for me to leave town. So that's kind of the deal.
Well, we get it, but I'm sure everyone is hoping that you do attend, but we do understand.
Yeah, thank you.
I think what a lot of people like about, you, Zuber, Dion, is you folks not only talk about your wins, but you guys always talk about some of the losses and struggles. But maybe can you talk about what's one mistake you made early in your investing journey that actually became a blessing in disguise?
Yeah, it's sort of related to this whole small and mighty thing. Like we had in 2007, I got really good at finding deals and buying deals. So I was like, all right, let's go, let's buy more. And I got really good at finding private money and like seller financing. And so I could do it, but I didn't know. That doesn't mean I should have done as much as I did. And so we bought a lot in 2007. And the end of the story is we ended up surviving and doing okay, but that was risky. Like that could have ended another way. Like I had friends in the real estate business who went bankrupt, who lost everything and had to start back over. And so I think the mistake I made was borrowing other people's goals and sort of getting ahead of myself. And to use a metaphor, like this is like if you were training for a marathon and you just went out there and started sprinting the first like 6 miles, like you're gonna crash and burn. Like that's not sustainable. I feel like that's what the temptation in real estate for me was, to like, let's go sprint, let's do this thing. When like in reality, this is like an ultra marathon. Like this journey of financial independence and wealth building is a super long journey. And it doesn't matter how many properties you have in year 3 or 4. What matters is, like, are you still in the game in year 20 or year 30? Like, are you still around financially? Are you still healthy? So I think, that was my biggest mistake, and I learned a ton from it. And like I said, I had to touch the fire to get burned. There's been a ton of other mistakes along the way. Like I have one right now that I'm not sure if it's just I'm not sure what the mistake is yet, but we've had several properties vacant right now. I made a video about this on my channel recently, and we've actually gotten 3 out of the 4 filled up. So I have 1 vacant. We basically just been cutting prices, and part of that is just like anticipating. I didn't anticipate the oversupply in the market, and we got a little aggressive on our rents. We probably should have dropped them sooner when we didn't, because we had on the market some of these properties in March of this year, and we're in a college town where you can pre-lease a lot of stuff. And so we try to get everything leased before August when everything turns over. And I think what I would have done is been more aggressive with my rents earlier instead of like sticking with that $1,900. We were at $1,900 a month on a house, for example. Now we're down to $1,595. we're $300 below that, and we're very seasonal in Clemson, so that's another part of the problem. If people don't come in for the college, if you don't get it rented before the college semester starts, it's kind of tricky to do that. And so it's been a combination of things, but I couldn't. It wasn't my fault that the Clemson University stopped hiring professors for a while with all the budget freezes, or that there's an oversupply in the market. So there's a bunch of things that happened, but what I could have controlled was how I adjusted to that and how quickly I adjusted to it. And I think that's a lesson. Some of us, myself included, get stuck on an existing way things are in the market, and we just try to keep sticking with that because that's the way it was 6 months ago. And when you're in a changing market like this, you have to adjust fast, and that's something I'm learning, continuing to learn.
Yeah, I love that. I'm sure everyone tuning in already has subscribed to your channel or knows, but if they haven't, there is your YouTube channel in the chat so they can go subscribe, hear that story about the rents, you having to adjust and deal with the market conditions currently. I'm not sure if REI Jared is here, but he's always mentioning you helping him, basically what you just talked on about kind of learning, not jumping in too quickly, and some of the mistakes you've learned, and you shared that with him at year one. Uh,
Awesome.
I do have some people tuning in from Instagram. So I see Peggy and Mark tuning in. If you guys can jump over to YouTube. But Mark does have a question. He says, I was wondering if you could speak on the current market challenges. He's saying Pittsburgh, but I think in general, concerning remote investors thinking about selecting this market versus other similar markets. So I know for your people that join your coaching program and whatnot, like how do you help them decide on what market to invest in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's probably the question. I would say the first question is, what's your strategy? Like, are you a long-term investor? Are you a fix and flip investor? Are you investing locally? So like, it's kind of picking your big strategy comes first when I'm coaching someone. But the second thing is like buy box. So Zuber and I are like 100% on the same page on this one. Like, you got to pick a buy box. But I think a lot of which market you invest in depends on your personal situation. And I think one of the shortcuts on this is looking at what your cash savings are. So you're going to have to put a down payment, or you're going to have to put in some cash into a deal typically, especially when you're long distance. And so let's just use real numbers. If you have $50,000 and you're going to invest 20% or 25, let's say 20% down payment, then that, if you work it backwards, like rough numbers, that's about $250,000 property. And so in some ways, you can look at all sorts of other factors about where to choose a market. But if you wanted to get in the game and $50,000 is the down payment you're trying to choose, you have available, then you have to start shooting for markets where you can probably buy properties in the 200s, like low 200s, maybe 225, somewhere in there. So that's a little bit of a shortcut. So I think, I have students in Pittsburgh, and I like Pittsburgh a lot. I like a lot of the Midwestern, the people used to call the Rust Belt, but where people are like, industries and technology and things are moving back into some of those cities, because if you have old housing inventory and you have dynamism and growth, then that's a pretty cool combination, because you can start finding old properties you can fix up. And you might have some properties that are selling for 250, 300, and you have other properties that are really old selling for 100 or 150 that need work. And so there's a lot of opportunity to find deals in those kind of markets that are fixer upper deals, burst strategy, things like that. So that's like kind of a general rule of thumb, is start with your down payment, work it backwards. But then once you look at the market, the most important factor I look at is population growth and economy. And so those are just like the big macro trends. If population is growing, then good things start happening in your real estate market. That's the bottom line. There are some markets where the population is kind of flat, and it can still be a good market. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just easier. Like you can kind of make up for some of your mistakes when you have a tailwind of population growth, either in your macro market. I think about markets like a solar system, where you start with the economic sun. So start with where all the jobs are. Like I think about Atlanta, where I grew up. Atlanta is the economic sun of that part of the Southeast. But then you have all these little satellite cities in and around Atlanta. I grew up in a town called Noonan, Georgia. I went to school in a place called College Park, Georgia. These are like 30,000, 50,000 person little communities that are in the gravity of the economic sun of Atlanta. So people still have jobs, people still have things to make money on. But you can look at the population growth and the overall economics of Atlanta. And then I like to go pick a little satellite city within those metro areas, so that you can hand pick like a little place that has its own character. Sometimes you can hand pick a place that has the numbers, the prices that make sense to you and your down payment. And I think that combination of starting with Economic Sun, then picking a satellite city that has the price range that makes sense for you is sort of a shortcut to get a market that really makes sense.
I know some people like to use like, Starbucks and Whole Foods. Do
Yeah.
you use Bucky's in your do you look for the data if Bucky's is coming to your area? But that was the first one I went to was in South Carolina. So that
Yeah,
was a
that's a
Bucky's.
good idea. I haven't done the Bucky's, but that's I'm big on downtowns, like walkable downtowns. And one reason I'm just personally like in my little town and community of Clemson, I'm trying to for 10 years now. We have a nonprofit that's been trying to build biking and walking trails, and I personally think it's really important to the fabric of a community. But I've also seen how difficult it is to build a walkable community. So like when I find a community that's actually already walkable, and there's a cool little downtown, and you get like in my town in Noonan, Georgia, where I grew up, there's a court square and there's a little grid, and there's nice sidewalks, and it's just very walkable. I think if you could find a place like that that's in a good economic zone where there's a gravity, like that's what I follow. Like Starbucks is cool too. I think following all the research of all the commercial things, but I look for infrastructure that is in a town that's a little underrated. So if it's right now, if the prices are a little lower, but it's got great infrastructure, it's walkable, it's got a nice downtown. Usually that's a indicator that things are going to get better, because that is so rare and it's so difficult to build that kind of stuff. It's like if you try to build that from scratch, it's really there are master plan communities that do that, but those are often really expensive and the prices are really expensive. So if you can find like less expensive houses near a walkable town center or park, that to me is like the gold. I really like that.
Great information. Brandon is here. Brandon is here, Build to Rent Texas. He's going to be one of the year 3 speakers at the ORED event with his Build to Rent model. But he said, I would love to connect, Chad. We are doing similar Build to Rent model investing. Are you growing those investments?
Yeah, we're actually building kind of on a small scale, but we are building right now. So I would love to learn from you too. And I think you've emailed me, so let's connect on that. I would love to. We built 5 houses with a builder partner last year, and we kept 2 of those as rentals, and we sold 3 of them. So that was sort of our model. It's like sell some, keep some. We just bought another house. It's kind of an interesting deal if you want to hear a little bit about it. It was a single family house that was for sale. It was on MLS, but it had an extra lot. And so it was like a double lot. Everybody knew that. And a lot of builders and people were trying to buy just the lot. Like the house was just a piece of junk and it just was like needed a ton of work. And everybody, like myself included, the paradigm we had on this was like, this is a 2-lot deal. So like when I ran the numbers, I was looking at it like, well, we could fix up the house and rent or sell that, and then we could build a house on another lot. So I would try to figure out what the lot was worth, the second lot. Well, I talked to my builder, and he's also a small developer, and he said, "No, Chad, I think the deal is tear the house down and look at the zoning on this property. I think we could have 3 lots. We could do a small lot subdivision and turn this into 3." And I just hadn't penciled the math. That was my fault. But we ran the numbers together, and that's what we ended up doing. So we just, like, right now when I drove by today, there's a big bulldozer bulldozing that old house. It's a brick house. It wasn't bad. It just needed a ton of work, and they had really neglected it. So it was bad enough that we were able to get it at a low enough price. And the prices, it was listed at 295 for the whole property. And we kept on making offers of like 189 for like 3 or 4 months. Never budged. They got it under contract 3 or 4 times with other people who all fell through because of due diligence. It was too much. Finally, they came down and we bought it at $190,000 for this house and lot. And we spent about 20 grand and tearing the house down and grading and just doing some stuff to get rid of all this stuff. So we're going to have like $210,000 in 3 lots. And so $70,000 per lot. And then we're going to build houses that I think are going to cost us about $210,000 total for 1,700 square foot, 3-bedroom, 3-bath with a 1-car garage. So kind of in our area, that's a starter home, maybe one step up from a little small starter home. But we're gonna try to rent those for about $2,000, and I think they'll be worth about $350. So we'll have 280 in them or so. So it'll be about 80% of the cost of value, renting them for about $2,000. And for us, at least in our area, that's that's a win. It's not like a home run, but it's a solid deal. And we're going to try to build 3 houses and then try to replicate that, do that again. So that's a little example of a deal that's working for us right now in 2025.
Yeah, especially in today's market, where prices are higher, interest rate is high, and people are just trying to figure out how to make deals work. So
Hmm.
that's why Brandon's model is working very well for him in Texas. So
Yeah.
I believe you met Cody Evers year one, but he says,
Mm-hmm.
Coach, thanks for giving me the inspiration to take a sabbatical. Spent 3 months with my family and took a road trip to Yellowstone, looking to re-enter workforce now.
Oh
How was,
man, that's
yeah, he
great.
says, how was it re-entering the workforce?
You know, well, it was different every time. In 2009, like for me, it's a little different than the workforce for me because I had my own business, and so I always like just got back into the business. And I'm like, all right, let's turn the volume up. Let's start buying more houses. That's sort of my reentry. I will say that when we went to Ecuador and when my daughters are 3 and 5, we stayed there for 17 months. So that was the longest time I stayed somewhere. I actually had a little bit of like depression coming back. Like it wasn't major, but it was like I was just really bummed coming back, getting back into it. My wife was too, and I think part of it was just when we were living as expats in Ecuador and also in Spain. It's almost like going back to college or something. Like we had all these friends and had this community, and just every day was something fun and new and interesting. And so as we came back I live in Clemson, South Carolina. We have a lot of friends here, and I love it here. But when we first got back, it was just different. Like for example, driving, I had to drive everywhere. We were in a very walkable place in Ecuador, and that kind of bugged me. Like we would be dropping our kids off in the school line and sitting there for 20, 30 minutes. And that kind of bugged me. It was just little things like that. So it was, some of that sounds kind of trivial now when I talk about it, but I was kind of bummed out about that. And just the lifestyle was so good being an expat. So I'm kind of addicted to that. I love traveling. For us and our family, it's sort of, we like being in Clemson, having our roots in a community, being invested there, then also doing other travel. And so I love that Yellowstone trip that he was talking about, and doing a road trip here and there. Like I'd like to do a kind of van life or RV trip with my kids at some point. That's kind of something on my mind. So I like to go out west, travel around some more, go to some more national parks, maybe spend some time in Montana where we have we have an 8-unit short-term rental partnership with somebody in Kalispell, Montana, right near Glacier National Park. So we'd like to go back out there. But they're great. They're a lot of fun.
Oh, interesting. The next question is from John. He has a short-term rental in Reno, but his question, he says, Chad's book is so much better than Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But
Thank you.
John's always hearing about, like, maybe short-term rentals or Airbnb dying, or the end of it. So maybe quickly, how's your short-term rental doing in Montana?
We have really good operators. So I'll say that. Like I'm the money partner behind the scenes, and then they're the operators. And it's year over year is better, a little bit better than it was last year, and last year was a lot better than the first year we did it. So it's good, but I will say it is changing. And I think the big thing about short term rentals, there's a couple things we did on this deal that I think was helpful. One was the zoning was commercial for hotels, so I think the trend where a lot of people got into it was you buy a residential house in a residential neighborhood and then turn that into Airbnb. And a lot of neighbors, like the NIMBYs, not my backyard, got upset about that. And so a lot of cities outlawed Airbnb or restricted it heavily in single family house subdivisions. So that's the big, I think that's risky, but Airbnb is here to stay. Like, I mean, how many, I don't know about y'all. I'd love to hear in the chat, like how many of you stay Airbnb sometimes when you're traveling? Like I know I do, like our family does. And so we stay in hotels too, but it's a thing, like it's a real thing now, and that's not going anywhere. I think there was a lot of supply, a lot of people got into it, and so it's kind of like a little bit of a bubble, had to kind of come back down to earth. And but I still think it's a really viable strategy if you're in the right location. So like our 8-unit building, you have to have some kind of amenity that is really attractive. Some people create their own amenities. They build little pickleball courts, and it's out in nature. So for me, I'm kind of back to the downtowns. Like I like the walkable downtown. This place it's walkable to the breweries and like restaurants in downtown Kalispell. It's within 20, 30 minutes drive of Glacier National Park. So it's kind of a jumping off point to those kind of things. So you got to have some kind of structural competitive advantage, I think, when you buy a short-term rental. And then you got to have somebody who will operate it. It's a hotel business. Like this is not a passive rental property. So the people who we're partnering with, they do this as a part-time job, and they have really good systems. They use door locks. They have all sorts of software. They are very personal, though. They leave handwritten notes for people. We've got over 200 reviews on Google, the 5-star reviews. I mean, they get tons and tons of good feedback, but they work hard to get that. But a lot of the hard work was on the front end, and now things are kind of rolling. And so once you get it rolling, it's not as much. They can travel. He does a bunch of hiking and goes to mountains all the time. They travel during the winter to get away from Montana. So it can be semi-passive once you get it going, but I don't want to like have any illusions about with it. It is more of a business than long-term rentals. But the benefit is you can have more cash flow if it works out.
Yeah, that's absolutely John's mindset. He's doing it for the cash flow. He feels his window to reaching that financial freedom is a little bit shorter because of his age, but he's definitely putting in the work. And yeah, like you said, he has the amenities, he has the hot tub, but
That's great.
his Airbnb is very cool. So I love
But
checking it out on YouTube. Yeah,
so that's in Reno. So if I go to Reno,
yeah.
is that right? So if I'm in Reno, I know I need to look him up. Stay.
All right,
I know where to stay.
all right, John. There you go. You got some bookings right there.
There we go.
I see a lot of people saying, "How can we get you to Vegas? We can tempt you somehow." They're saying for the ORAD event.
All right. Makes me feel good that y'all want me to come. That means a lot. So that might be the tipping point then.
All right, we got Scott tuning in. He has a question. He says, "What is your ideal percentage of equity across your portfolio, and how do you determine this percentage?"
Okay. I think the question, make sure I'm answering the right question, is like, I think you're thinking like over time, like your loan to value, like how much do you have in debt versus how much do you have in equity? Is that what you understood it as, Mark, as well? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you where I started, and I'll tell you be transparent with where I am right now. Like I'm always thinking about it, and I don't have like a perfect answer to this, but when we first started, we were always like, most deals we did were like 70% loan to value. So you would buy a deal that was a fixer upper, and we would borrow 70% from a private lender. And then, that was kind of the normal deal. Sometimes we would borrow more from like a seller financing deal, maybe 80, 90%. But my goal as we've matured, I have this idea that I talked about in the Small and Mighty Investor, where you begin as a starter, and when you're first starting, you just buy a first deal or two, you're going to be pretty high loan to value. You're just trying to get your foot in the door. Like the more leverage, the better. Do a 5% down loan, get it, but then you eventually get into the builder stage, and you're focused on growth, and you want to do it safely though. And so maybe you still use some leverage, but you also want to have good cash reserves. You want to put a little bit bigger down payment, but you're still trying to reinvest your cash, grow. But then I think the stage everybody misses, at least in the real estate investing space, you don't hear Rich Dad Poor Dad talking about this, is you get to the harvester phase where the rules change a little bit, where actually having a bunch of debt is not necessarily a good thing, I don't think. And so for me at that point, having a lower debt to value is more advantageous, for the reason of, not because you're going to maximize growth. You're not maximizing growth when you pay off debt. But what you are doing is you're increasing peace of mind. You're increasing the cash flow on your properties. You're reducing your risk in case we had like some crazy deflationary stuff or just whatever, who knows, black swan events. And so for me, over time, as we've gotten we're in the harvester phase, my business partner and I, it's more like 15%, 20% loan to value. So if the value of your portfolio is $1 million, that means it'd be more like $150,000 to $200,000 in debt. And some of that debt we have some seller financing with like 0% interest and 20 years left on it. We've got some private loans from family members who are just like, don't pay us off. This is our retirement income. Like we don't want the money back. And so most of the loans we do have are pretty safe. People we know. We have one commercial loan on a multi-unit property. The property is probably worth $5 or $6 million, and we owe 800,000 or so. So it's just like, it's not a huge risk. Like we had to pay it off. We're keeping an eye on it, but we could easily get a loan to pay that off. So for me, risk is the big deal. The lower loan to value you are, the less risk you take. And there's this quote, I think it's from Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett, but they said it's insanity to risk what you already have for something you don't even need. And that's the attitude here. Is like, once you've made it, once you've won the game, like why would you risk? Like it's like a football game. Like you're in the fourth quarter, you're up by 3 or 4 touchdowns. Like why would you keep throwing Hail Marys and risking the interception and they could score another point? Like it makes zero sense to take that kind of risk. And so I think having a harvester phase where you have less debt is the rational thing to do long run. And that doesn't mean you can't keep growing, but like I like to think about it like you build this little fortress in your portfolio that's super, super safe and super conservative so that you don't slide backwards and you have that fortress around it. And if you want to go outside the fortress and go outside the castle and go grow again and flip houses and do whatever, like cool, that's fine. You don't have to stop growing, but just like don't go backwards, don't lose, don't. That's the thing that I think would be the biggest travesty.
I love that. I think that's one of the stories. It kind of relates to the story in your book, and I don't want to give too much information on that,
Give it
but
a yeah. Go ahead. Yeah,
well,
that's
no,
fine.
if you want to that
Yeah,
that's really you presented it at
yeah,
the event, and you're talking about the three couples,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that story, I think it relates to exactly what you're saying. So maybe you want to touch on that. That's a true story, right? Or is I
It's
forget.
actually it's not well, yeah, it is a kind of a combination of people I know, but I actually borrowed that story. It's a lot of stories. I borrowed it from a guy named Jack Miller. When it was my first year in real estate, I went to a seminar, and he was he's a friend of John Schaub's. They used to teach together, and he was really smart. I heard him say it, but here's the story. There's three couples who are real estate investors, and they met each other when they were brand new investors, like 15 years ago, and they were at a one rental at a time event, or they met each other there. They became friends, and they all went their separate ways in different parts of the country, and they started investing. They were all successful, and 15 years later they're like, let's take a trip together, this will be fun, we're still friends, and we're kind of a mastermind group. And they decided to go to Europe. And I'll tell you about each couple real quickly. The first couple lived in St. Louis. They had 10 single family houses paid off free and clear, and they made $10,000 per month from those 10 single family houses. So like they rented for like $1,800, but after they paid all their expenses, they had no debt on them, so they made $1,000 per property times 10. They made $10,000. So that's couple number one. So they had plenty of money to do this trip, all good. The second couple did a little bit differently. They lived in Oakland, California, but they had these apartments in North Carolina, and I think they had 50 units. They had some long-term debt on their units, but they also made about $10,000 per month, and they had a property manager who managed it all for them. So they were in a pretty good shape, made enough money, so they went on the trip. The third couple was like financially the most successful couple. They had the most money, the most cash flow. They started off investing in Las Vegas. They'd done pretty well, and they decided like, hey, we could replicate this, and let's like do it in other towns and buy multifamily property. And they started syndicating, raising money, raising funds, and they're making a ton of money. I think the example, I think it was like $600,000 per month or something. I mean, they're or $60,000 per month. So they're making over, I think they're making over $1 million in cash flow per year. They were doing really, really well. And they also went on the trip. And so they all went for like 2 weeks on this trip. They got to the end, and the first couple with the 10 houses was like, hey, this is amazing. Like, why don't we extend the trip? There's another cruise we can go on to another part of the Mediterranean. And the second couple's like, I'm in, let's do it. This is summertime, we're good. The third couple, the one with the most money, they had to bow out because they had lost the property manager on one of their units, and they had to go back and interview new property managers. They had to go to a couple of events to raise money for the next deal, and there's always something going on. They had some other personnel issues. The point was like they had a ton of money. They had like the most money, but they were not the wealthiest when it came to time and flexibility. And that story really struck me because to me, it gets to like the core of this idea of what wealth is. Like, what are you really trying to accomplish here? And money is very important. Like, I love making money. I don't have any problem making money, but there's this idea of finding like a happy medium where what's the business model that gives you the most money, that gives you enough money that you need. Enough is the key word. It gives you enough money plus a huge full bank account of time and flexibility. And if you don't have all three, you'll be chained to a desk making a bunch of money, but you'll be like Scrooge McDuck swimming in your money, but you got no freedom and no flexibility. And so I aspire to be more like one of the first two couples and have be a time billionaire instead of trying to have the biggest business and the largest business that eventually sometimes turns into a Frankenstein. Like I talked about that story where the business itself takes on a life of its own. And yes, you might make a lot of money, but there's always people to hire and personnel to deal with. And, it takes over your life in many cases, having a big business. And so I think there's small and mighty businesses, one rental at a time businesses, prioritize the lifestyle, the time, the flexibility. And they also, really importantly, they figure out this place that's enough, where they have enough money, where they can do everything they need to do, and they're willing to like cut back a little bit and say, I think I'm gonna actually like cash in on this. I'm gonna live my life and do some of the goals I had in the first place. And that's really difficult for people who are like me, type A personalities, to step back and say, I've got enough. I've hit the curve, the top of this enough curve where if I kept going for more money, I would actually be dipping into the other currencies that I really want. And that's a tricky thing to figure out for yourself. We all have different places that's enough, but I think it's like the epitome of the important part of being a small money investor.
You kind of brought it up. You mentioned Frankenstein, creating a Frankenstein, and then at the event you also touched on pruning the tree.
Yeah.
So can you maybe touch on those two things, like about creating a Frankenstein and what that is, and then about pruning the tree?
Yeah, so if everybody knows the Frankenstein monster from Halloween, but the actual original Frankenstein story was a book by Mary Shelley, and the book was there's a really smart scientist who created his name was Frankenstein, the scientist, and he created this monster that was not a monster originally. Like he was the idea he learned how to bring things to life, and it was like the horror story was he created this like being. It set up. It was supposed to be like a helpful thing, and the thing like took over his life and was a horrible thing, and it was a horror story. And I find big businesses are often like that. They start off with good intentions and really smart people, but then the thing wakes up in the business like, well, wait a minute, like I didn't mean to create this. Like is this really what I wanted? And so that's what I call it, the business beast or Frankenstein. It's not that you can't tame the beast. They're really smart people who build big businesses and who are able to step away from it. But there's a survivor bias. Like we see the people who succeed, but we don't hear the stories of the 999 out of 1,000 who crash and burn, whose health gets killed, who they're sick, they're overworked, they're stressed, their relationships are bad, the business failed, they went bankrupt. Like we don't tell those stories. Instead, we hear like the one, the Elon Musk or the big huge real estate investor who did really really well. So I like to just bring up the business beast and the Frankenstein just to say that's real. Like that stuff happens. Um, so on the other side of things, if you're a harvester as a small mighty investor, one of the strategies that we've employed is to the metaphor is like to prune the bushes. So like a healthy fruit tree, if you're trying to grow a healthy portfolio, with a fruit tree, you prune some of the bushes in order to have the other branches be healthier. So if you want to make apple trees that produce a lot of fruit, you don't want to have like a ton of apple branches. You want to like prune a bunch of them, and then the ones that are left have all the energy and the water and the nutrients. And I think a portfolio is like that too. And so one of the strategies that we had, we bought more than we needed. So let's just, to use round numbers, let's say you wanted to end up with those 10 properties like we talked about before with that couple. Maybe you buy 15 or 20 properties during your build-up phase, your growth phase. And so you have equity in all those properties. And then you start pruning off the properties that are your worst properties, the ones that are, they're just not the perfect rental. They're too much maintenance. They're in the wrong location, whatever. But you got some equity, you bought it well, or it's grown over time. And so you start selling off some of those properties. And you could do a 1031 exchange, which makes the most sense from a tax standpoint. And so that's okay. You could do that. But you could also just pay the tax and just sell it and take that money and pay off the debt on the rest of your properties because you have enough, like you've gotten there, right? You bought more than you needed. And one way to measure, this is something I've started talking about more recently. The way you measure when you have enough is look at the net operating income of your properties. So the net operating, a lot of you probably know what that means, but like if you look at the net operating income, it's the gross rent minus all of your operating expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance, management, everything except for your mortgage payment. And if you track your portfolio, once, like, let's say your number is $10,000 per month, if your whole portfolio, the NOI on your portfolio, net operating income is like $15,000, you technically have enough. Like if you were to pay off those properties, you have enough money to pay for your FI number, your financial independence number. So like one goal you might have is like get up to like 15 or 16 or $17,000 in NOI, and then prune back your portfolio to sell some of those to get back to that $10,000 number. But you get that back to 10,000 with free and clear properties or very low debt properties. And now you're in like that's that kind of fortress portfolio where you have enough income, but it's safe, it's very low debt. That's a pretty cool place to be in.
Let's see. I saw some questions. So lead pray huddle. Nick is here. He's kind of a regular also now on Zuber's channel. He's in California. He's a teacher. He's a basketball coach. He sold his rentals and he went all in on Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
But he loves Charlotte, so he's probably gonna retire in Charlotte. He said he's trying to figure that out. But he did have a question. Where did it go? He says, crud, where did it go? Any concern about overbuilding in the South? That's my concern for Charlotte. Now that I see Florida, Texas, Idaho markets going down currently.
Yeah. Yeah, overbuilding is I think that's the story of the day right now. Like in at my little town of Clemson, South Carolina, we're I think temporarily overbuilt, but that's a judgment call. Like some people might say, I'm out of here. Like this thing's overbuilt. So Charlotte, Atlanta, Austin, Texas was the first one to get overbuilt. There's too many units. I think this is just a natural part of the process. Like if any, the best markets that are also easier to build in are going to get overbuilt. But it's kind of like the question we have to ask ourselves is like, what's the long term trend? And so in my market in Clemson, the long term trend is the university going to keep growing? Are they going to keep increasing enrollment? And their board has said that they're shooting for like 2.5 or 2 to 3% growth over the long run. So they're at 25,000 students right now. So if you look at that growth trend, that's kind of where they're going. And so if you look at like a trend line like that, it never goes perfectly smooth. Like the way in Clemson, like they've built apartment buildings, and usually it goes in cycles. So we've had like 4,000 student beds come on the market in like a 1 or 2 year period. And so the equivalent of that is like throwing a little pond, throwing a big old rock in a pond, and it's just going to create a ton of waves in that little pond. But the question is that pond getting bigger over the long run? Like that's the question I'm asking myself. Is still we have to make a educated guess. So my educated guess in Clemson, South Carolina, is that over the next 10 to 20 years, the pond's going to keep getting bigger, and that it's more difficult to build new construction than it is to increase the supply or increase the demand. So that's the bet we're making in a real estate market. Is most markets, the more growth you get, the harder it is to build, and so the building is further and further out on the outskirts. And some of my favorite markets, though, are places where there's natural barriers to building. So like Charlotte, is a suburban market, but if you buy infill, like in town kind of stuff, like in town market, there's certain people who want to live in town, and there's no more places to build in town. Like you either have to go up, which is really difficult. You have to assemble a bunch of properties. And so if you've ever tried to develop a property, you know how difficult it is to build and redevelop stuff. And so if you're in an area where there's lots of growth, I go back to population growth. If the population is growing, if the area is a place people want to be for the next 10 to 20 years, and you invest in an infill area that's hard to build in, then that's a pretty good recipe. Like demand's going to go up, supply is going to be tough. And so if you own existing supply, then you're going to tend to do better. What we see right now, though, is place, especially in Texas and the South, where building is a little bit easier than California and New York. The supply came, like people built it, and so we got to deal with that issue in the short run. But to be a long term investor, this is like another Warren Buffett thing. You got to have a long term perspective. And I actually think when in the next year or so, investors in my town, some of them are going to kind of panic a little bit because their rents are dropping by 30% temporarily. I'm going to be trying to pick some of those off. I'm going to buy some of the best properties in town because I'm not worried about it. Like I think we're okay.
Curtis, PE turned RE, says he doesn't know how I tricked you to be on my channel, but
What? Come on now. Mark and I have been talking about this forever. So this is good, for sure.
but Jim, Grumpy Contractor, is here, and this is maybe a great place to start with what your rental property mastery is all about, because Jim is one of your newest
Yeah.
members of that,
Yeah.
and I know that caused kind of a big stir also on social media, because you had to kind of, I think people thought you were doing clickbait by saying there was only 300 spots, right? So
Right.
but Jim's question first, though, is what's your opinion on diversity after being stabilized, adding a short-term rental, mid-term rental, or rent by room Section 8? So I guess he's asking,
Like
yeah,
diversifying away from long-term rentals, maybe like doing a little bit of a little bit of different strategies. Is that
well,
what?
once you stabilize, I guess, then
Mm.
adding another strategy in, I guess, after.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, Jim, we can talk about it too. We can do some one-on-ones and kind of think through that. Like I think in general, though, I like to focus on one strategy and get really good at it, which I think that's what you're saying. Like, just go all in. Like, if you're a short-term rental person, do it really well. If you're a rent by the room person, do it really well. If you're a long-term rental, whatever you're into, build to rent, whatever, it takes a lot of knowledge and skill to get good at that. So I think one of the biggest risks we have in real estate and business in general is like shiny object syndrome. We kind of go from one thing to another, and we lose some of our focus and our it's like a laser beam. You know, if you have a light that's a flashlight, it's not very powerful, but when you focus that light into a little laser beam, like it can cut something. It's really powerful. So in general, Jim, I would say that's like my philosophy. But I think there is value in diversifying eventually. Like first be intense, and then over time, as you build wealth, it makes sense to diversify. And I'm trying to diversify. I'm all in on Clemson, South Carolina, which has been great for me. But like, what if the university shuts down? Which I don't think is likely. But what if it happens? What if things change? Like, what if this drop in rent is permanent? You know, that could affect me. So like, I am diversifying, and I'm doing it in a couple ways. One, I am partnering like that 8-unit building in Montana. It was partnering with somebody else who can operate it. Like I don't want to be spreading myself so thin that I'm doing short-term rentals over here and long-term rentals. Like I only do long-term rentals mainly student rentals in my town. And that's what I know. I also do single family house. I self-manage some of my single family houses just because they're really straightforward and easy to do. So I know my lane. I know what I'm good at. And then I also diversifying a little bit geographically by not being in South Carolina. And I'm also diversifying in other asset classes. So I did a YouTube video on this if y'all are interested in all the details of that, my actual percentages, and I kind of lay it out. But I'll tell you like a summary. Real estate's still like 70%, 75%. But I want to have an increasing percentage be in equities. So just index funds. I'm just a straight index fund investor. I'm playing around. My current allocation is like 75% US. I use VTI as the one I buy, and then 25% VXUS, just everything not in the US. I don't know if that's a good strategy or not. Like it hasn't worked for the last 10 or 15 years because the US has like killed it. But and also a lot of US companies have international exposure. So I just, McDonald's is all over the world. Coca-Cola is all over the world. NVIDIA is selling stuff all over the world. So I don't know. I'm not a stock index investor, but I think I do low cost index investing. I do a little bit of Bitcoin just for fun, and that's done pretty well too. And I'm also doing a little bit of venture capital kind of investing, not like a huge amount, but just I've invested in a couple tech companies in my space, like in the personal development online creator space too. So just nothing's not a significant part of my portfolio, but I do think diversifying away from my main thing after you've become a harvester and you made it is probably a smart thing to do.
Yeah, so let's right here maybe dig into a little bit what the RPM is all about. I know Jim was able to get in. He was worried about the limited space. And maybe, like you said, is there a wait list or what can people
Yeah.
expect by joining it?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. I spend a lot of my time on YouTube and just doing stuff for free, and then I have a community where I get more involved with coaching called Rental Property Mastery. And the way I started this, it was I wanted it to be like a small town. I live in a small town of Clemson, and I feel like as a teacher and a coach, there are places for like bigger communities too. There's advantages to that, but I really wanted to get to know people and have like know their name and know their situation and have a long-term relationship with them. And I felt like it had to be sustainable from a business standpoint, but that 300 number was the number. So we really did cut it off. We have a waiting list now. September 1st was when we hit 300. And so every month we're going to be opening up just the number of spots that people who are up for renewal who don't renew. So I think it might be like 6 or 8 or so spots that come open in the next couple weeks. So that's the way it'll go now. So if anybody is interested, I definitely will have spots available, and you could just reach out. You could go to the link that Mark put on there, and you could click on the button to apply, and we'll get you on the list. Or you could email me as well, chad@coachcarson.com. We could just communicate directly either way. But I love, whether it's this, like talking to you guys here, or doing YouTube or doing coaching and RPM. Like I'm financially independent. So like I get this question from the haters on YouTube sometimes, like, well, why would you be teaching if you're financially independent? Like I pay the bills with real estate. That's there. But my calling, like I feel my passion is teaching and coaching. Like it's fun for me. I actually consider going back and coaching football back in the day because I played football in college, and I love the idea that you can, use your knowledge and your skills to help other people be successful for themselves. Like one of my favorite books is this little book by John Wooden, who's a basketball coach. It's by my bed. I reread it all the time. It's little short chapters. I think coaching is such a cool, also just a privilege. It's just a really, really neat. So that's that's why I do it. I'm passionate about it. I love it. And rental property mastery is my opportunity to just to get really engaged with people. And so like, Jim can call, we can do a one-on-one call and I can get to know his situation a little bit better. And we can ask that diversification question, but I'd like to like dig in a little bit more and say, all right, let's look at the existing portfolio and see what he already has. And then I can ask more questions and get a little bit more depth. And that's the kind of thing you can do when you do some coaching and also in a community of other people. So that's the point of all that.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm going to be a little selfish here. I see a lot of
Go
questions,
for it.
but you brought up coaching just now, and I actually saw Ray Lewis on Patrick Bet David's podcast recently, and he was kept pushing him about why is he not coaching or why doesn't he want to
Yeah.
coach right now and come back, and he played linebacker just like you.
He's a lot better than me though.
But he doesn't want to coach right now because he thinks like the game. I wouldn't say I don't want to put words in, but he's almost saying it's soft, like they're taking
Mm.
away the physicality of it, and that's why it's hard for him to go back to coach. I mean, would you have difficulty, you think, going back the way the game is now?
Yeah, Ray Lewis is a headhunter, man. He was a lot of his strategy was intimidation, and that's kind of old school linebacker, and I get that. But I also get that like I love football. Like it's a passion, and I know a lot about it. But I think the sustainability of the sport is like at risk if you don't do something about concussions. And so I think a lot of the rules they've done are smart. I think for too long the NFL and the NCAA has sort of treated players like paper plates who are expendable, and you can kind of throw them away. And yet, I mean, you look at some of the stories of 20 years later. Junior Seau, he was a hero of mine growing up, linebacker, and he had the CRT disease or whatever it was, and yeah,
CTE, yeah.
CTC. I'm sorry, yeah, CTE. Super sad. So I think football is a great sport, and I think it needs to evolve. I'm happy it's evolving where you don't have head-to-head contact. You got to like kick people out of the game for targeting so that they change their behavior. And I've seen for the most part, I mean, people are tackling differently, and it might make it a little bit harder on defense, yes, but um, I think you gotta evolve with the game, and you gotta coaching is still coaching, and coaching is about people. Like, and this is what I've learned about real estate investing. It's the same thing with football. John Wooden talks about this with the basketball coach. Technically, you're coaching people in football. Technically, you're coaching people in real estate. But what you're really doing is trying to help them become a better person, and you're trying to help them grow as a human being. And that's the part I'm addicted to. Like, I love that. Like, I think you see somebody's potentials up here and they're like operating right here. The coach's job is to like close that gap, help them see they might not even realize that their potential is up here. And you as a coach are saying, no, like this is where you need to play. You're better than that. I mean, nothing's changed about that. That's always what coaching is about. And yeah, some of the specifics have changed, but you either gotta love coaching. It's kind of like teaching. Like people who teach high school or middle school, like those are the heroes, man. They're not getting and firefighters too. Like, I mean, you're not getting paid what you deserve and for the work you're doing. So you just gotta love it. You gotta be passionate about it. And I think that's the same. NFL coaches get paid a lot, but high school coaches, middle school coaches, like those are the ones I admire. They're the ones who are working with kids when they're at their most kind of vulnerable part of their life, when they really are impressionable. If I got back into football coaching, that's what I would do. I'd go to my local middle school and coach there, coach rec ball or something where you can really kind of catch people early.
Well, before we get to some more real estate questions, and Curtis, who does coach football, he's a teacher. But quickly, who was your favorite linebacker? Your favorite all-time linebacker?
Well, Junior Seau, growing up, I had his card. I heard a story about him, how he, during practice, if somebody was like on the other side of the field, he would always sprint like 60 yards away and like chase that person down. Like he was just like I mean, he trained in practice just being relentless. Like I was like, wow, that's intense. That's pretty cool. So I liked him. I mean, Dick Butkus was kind of fun just to watch old films of, just like old school linebacker. When I was in high school, there was I don't even know if people know who this was, but there's a linebacker at Georgia Tech who ended up playing for the Falcons named Keith Brooking. And he was from my hometown in Coweta County, Noonan, Georgia. And so I just looked up to him. I used to clip, clippings from him. And that was sort of like a role model. Like I could be like him. I could play like that. And he was more like close to my age and tried to be like him. So Keith Brooking was more recent. And then Junior Seau was awesome. Urlacher was pretty cool. I used to like watch.
Yes, the
I might watch
Bears.
with the Bears. Like, man, that he was just like classic. Just amazing middle linebacker and was versatile. So those are a few names that come to mind for me.
because you were what, late 90s at Clemson, or what?
Yeah, 98 through 2001 were my seasons when I was there.
Oh, so you weren't there when I think he played running back. It kind of has a story about him now where he had to watch his, was it his younger brother? He had to bring to classes with him. That was Clemson, right?
Oh, yes, yeah, there's this a movie made out of that. He came in right after me. There's a safety who basically adopted or took care of his brother, and the movie's called The Safety. It's a Disney movie, and it was yeah, that was right after me. So my era was Tommy Bowden was the coach at Clemson, and we used to have the Bowden Bowls where Tommy Bowden was the coach, and we play against Bobby Bowden at Florida State, and we felt they had Bowden Bowl 1, 2, and 3, and I played against Michael Vick. That was at Virginia Tech. That was probably the best player I played against. So I missed tackles against Michael Vick. That's my claim to fame.
Well, to be in the realm, I mean, the vicinity of him is amazing because
Yeah,
he's a blur. But
yeah, he was good.
let's. So Curtis is asking, what do you think of being over leveraged while continually house hacking?
Yeah, I mean, um, what was it when I was over leveraged? Is that what the question was, or just the fact that you're over leveraged when you house hack? The fact that
Yeah.
you put a
So
small amount of money down.
yeah, so that's how he's
Mm,
got his first
yeah.
property. So if you don't, Curtis has a YouTube channel. He house hacked, but his claim to fame is that he bought a house, basically boarded up a room, had no shower. He lived in
Uh,
it, had a toilet. He would use the shower at the gym, but that's how he got on the property ladder, and that's how he house hacked.
so cool. I mean, I think you have to take a risk at some point. So I the only my problem with debt and risk is just when people do it blindly. But I mean, if you get into it, you got to start somewhere, right? And everybody's got to take a risk. And so I think if getting a 5% down or a 3.5% down house hack deal where you can just get your foot in the door and get on that property ladder, like you say, like you got to do that at some point. And so if you're going to take a risk getting a 30-year fixed loan that you live in, where it's either the same cost or lower cost than what it would be for you to live somewhere else, like that to me is like that's a reasonable risk, right? I mean, some people would call it crazy that you know go shower at the gym and do all that. I call that being an entrepreneur, being someone who's got a vision. You know that's great, and so I think there are ways to deal with risk if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to be smart, if you're willing to bring in a team. And house hacking to me, I love house hacking. If I had to start over again, I'd do the same thing. I would do house hacking just like I did. My funny story, my daughter. I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. So 12-year-old's in middle school, and they both got to listen to me speak one time, talk about real estate, and they've heard me do some interviews here and there. And so my daughter, I think I asked her one time, like, well, are you going to do real estate investing one of these days? She's like, yeah, when I turn 18, I'm going to read your book and I'm going to house hack and I'm going to live in a duplex. I'm like, all good. All right. I'm good with that. And so the seed has been planted that that's my favorite strategy for her too. Like if you can live somewhere and live for free early in your career when money's at a premium, like that's amazing because you can save money and keep growing.
All right, I don't know how much time you have, but
Mm.
there is a lot of questions. We might have to try and get you
Yeah.
back on another time
I'm,
if you
I'm happy
can.
to. Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
But let's try to get to a few more then. So Flavio's asking, is there something that's not in your book that you would like to share? Any experience?
Um, I mean, the recent stuff I was talking about, new construction, I think is it's an example of how you have to adapt to the market. I think it's just I was actually thinking back in my first book I wrote called Retire Early with Real Estate. I had a list of strategies in that book, and I didn't include rent by the room. I didn't include short term rentals. I don't think in there, and that was like 2018, right? So it's the strategies and the flavors of real estate investing change. There's things that come and go. The core principles are the same though. Like you know, how you make money in real estate, you make money from the cash flow, you make money from paying the debt down, you make money from the growth. That's it. Like that's not changing. But how you apply that, I think, is different. So I think that's something that story since my book that I would just say. It's just you gotta keep on your toes. You got to pivot. You got to watch YouTube, listen to different ideas, but then just don't forget the core principles. The principles are all the same, and so just keep grounded in that.
I'm not sure if this is in your lane because I've never heard you talk too much about side hustles. But
Mm.
Pokizon's asking, "Hello, sir. I am 16. Can you tell me some side hustle ideas for my money making? I am very esteemed to make some profit."
Mm.
Hmm.
I love side hustles, by the way. Like I probably this is probably something I don't talk about enough, but like I love real estate, but I see real estate as something to do once you already have money. like once you've already made money. So I think you need to have a job or a business or a side hustle. In fact, like this, I just had a one-on-one coaching call yesterday with somebody in my community, and she is an investor. And she has $100,000, but she's about to leave her job next year, her W-2 job, and she's just kind of stressed and worried about it. And so we spent like 45 minutes just brainstorming her business ideas. So we were like, number one, she had this. She's in Hawaii, actually. I need to connect you with her, but she we started talking about co-hosting on short-term rentals. We started talking about finding deals. We also started talking about a non-real estate business she has that has a lot of opportunity. So like to answer his question though, like I told this to this person yesterday too. If think about, you know what a Venn diagram is, where you have like three circles and like where they intersect in the middle is what like the center of the Venn diagram. I think for any business you start, the perfect place to be, if you can find it, is like the intersection of three things. Number one, what are you passionate about? Is there just something you're like super interested in? You're like, man, I read about this stuff. I watch YouTube videos all the time just because I love it. That's number one. Number two, are you good at it? Do you have skills? So you can be passionate about it, but not any good at it, and that wouldn't help. And then number three, is it something that people are willing to pay for and they need? So there's a lot of hobbies you have that you're passionate about it and you're good at it, but nobody's going to buy it. And so if you start with like, what do people need? Then and work it backwards, then that's a great idea for a side hustle. And there's an unlimited, as many problems as people have in the world, there are businesses you can build around those problems. So for example, my daughter, my 12-year-old is doing babysitting. She's doing a babysitting business. She loves kids. She just kind of gets along with them. She's really good at it. She's very empathetic. She gets down to their level. And there's people in our neighborhood who their parents who are like super busy and they got to do stuff. They just want to work out for an hour or two and they just want somebody to watch their kids. So she has basically, as much business as she wants. And she went out and I went with her. She put flyers on all the mailboxes saying, here's my baby. And she used ChatGPT to do her flyer, by the way. That was pretty funny. And she, here's the flyer. Here's my rate. Here's how it works. Here's my email. And that's an example of a little side hustle for a 12-year-old. And as a 16-year-old, you could do lawn businesses. You could cut grass. You could do, just Google side hustles for teenagers, but screen them. There's gonna be hundreds of ideas out there. Which one are you good at? Which one are you interested in? And then the way you test it, if people are willing to pay for it, is don't waste a lot of time. Go out and make an offer. Like get your little flyer, the equivalent of my daughter's little flyer, and just ask people if they'll pay you. That's how you know you have a business, and you can get paid with a PayPal account. You can get paid with Venmo. Like don't complicate this thing. Get a flyer or a digital business card and make an offer and see if people pay you. And now you're in business.
All right, I'm gonna blame myself. I probably only got about 10, 15 more minutes left because I do have to get my son ready for school. So I'm gonna pick about 3 or 4 more questions. But what you folks can do is please comment on the video after and let coach know that you want to see him back on so that I don't have to trick him to come back and do this again with me. But Jen's asking, this is one of the videos you did with Zuber, and I think this was a great video. But thanks for talking about the maintenance period. Everyone only talks about growth and harvest. I'm in the boring, painful maintenance period.
Yeah. Yeah. The maintenance is when you've already bought your property. Now you're having to save up your down payment again, or maybe it's a year or two before you buy your next one. I think it's like the unsung part of your career. Like it's exciting to buy a new deal. It's exciting to do the deal. I love doing deals, but it's that in between time when I think you really build your foundation as a good business. And I'm trying to spend a lot of time on that myself, but also with my community and teaching people. This is the time when you build your systems. Like there's a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber that I read back in the day, the first business book I read. And he talks about you want to work in your business and you want to work on your business. Working in your business is, doing the maintenance, going to fix stuff or, collecting rent. Working on your business is building a system so that you don't have to collect the rent. So it happens automatically, or building a system so that, you have a checklist for maintenance instead of just like flying by the seat of your pants. And so that like during that maintenance period, you not only literally can work on maintenance and like building your maintenance systems, but also your rental systems, also your spreadsheets, your bookkeeping. Like I've done coaching with a lot of real estate investors, and I've seen how bad, not saying all of you on this call, but like everybody else has some really bad bookkeeping. Like let's call it like it is. Like that's something you got to get better at. Like it's kind of treating your business like a pro instead of being like an amateur. Like be a pro, like pros have good bookkeeping, pros have good systems, they have SOPs, standard operating procedures, they have checklists, they have, like all your properties, you should have a list of all the utilities, like where are the utility companies. Let's have a list of who your contacts are for your contractors and things like that. So it's just getting organized. Nobody loves cleaning up the kitchen or loves doing their laundry really, but it's just something you got to do, and that's what you have to do during the maintenance period. And if you make it like a game, say, hey, I'm building up the capacity of my business so that when I buy the next property and the next property, I'll have a solid foundation. That's I think that makes it a little bit more exciting to do that.
Dion is tuning in, and you both
Hey,
will be at
Dion.
the Bigger Pockets event. And he said he also mentioned you'll be on a panel together.
Yes.
But Dion was telling us a story when he first met you at Zuber's Year One event, and you introduced yourself as Coach Carson. And Dion said, "Oh, your parents must really hate you. They named you Coach." But so that's a story he always tells us.
Uh, he
But
also
his
he also acted like he didn't know me, and I was like, "Oh, all right. I thought we had met online." And it was like, "No, no." He's like, "I don't know who you are." And he was looking dead serious. And for a moment, I was like, "Okay, well, maybe I don't. Maybe this is not Dion. Maybe this is somebody else."
Yes, Dion does that too. He makes you
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
But his question is, what has been your response to the Crash Bros for the last 17 years?
Obviously, I've ignored them since I've kept buying properties. I don't know. I trust people like I keep quoting Warren Buffett though, but because I think I like to listen to people who've been in it for 50 years instead of people who've been in it for like 3 years on YouTube and just complain about stuff. And what people who've been in it for 50 years say is it's impossible to time the market. It's impossible to predict exactly what's next. And so if that's true, like you can either choose to believe that or not to believe it. I believe that's true. I think you can't really, you have to be educated about the market. Like I listen to Zuber. Zuber's my guy in terms of what's going on with the economy and the market. But like at some point you have to like say, the future's uncertain. What do I do about that? And so for me, the idea is like I choose to think that in my market, things are going to get better over the next 10 to 20 years. And so like the fluctuations, the ups and the downs, like right now my rents are dropping. Should I run for the hills and things are crashing and sell all my real estate? Like, or should I say this is a challenge and this is an opportunity for me to go buy more properties probably, and I'm just going to stick with it. And that mindset is very different. And yeah, it really has to do. I'll go back to football. My football metaphor. I used to play middle linebacker. That was my position, and I told Zuber this. Like, there's always like 350-pound, really strong linemen running right at me, trying to like block me. And once they get their hands on you, you're not getting away from those people. That's kind of like the economy. Like you got to keep your head on a swivel, and you got to be nimble. Small and mighty investors, one rental at a time investors, have to be small and nimble. And we can be like, big, huge investors who have these, thousands of units and their hedge funds and all that. They might have some advantages, but one of the advantages they don't have is they're not fast and nimble. They are like big, huge boats that take a long time to turn. We're like tiny little speedboats, right? We can change, we can pivot, we can adapt. And so that's how I've reacted. I've just said, you know what? I'm going to have my head on a swivel. I'm going to keep going. I know what I'm trying to do. I know how I'm trying to win. I'm not going to ignore the market. I'm not going to ignore the fact that things are changing, but I'm not going to try to predict it. I'm just going to be ready for anything. And I think that goes back to the, philosophy of reducing risk, of being, risk averse. That helps you be flexible. It helps you change and pivot. And Dion knows this because he is like the epitome of the small, mighty investor and being, flexible and in a pivot. And he and I both kind of ignored that, the doomers, and we've been better off for it.
Well, I think Dion likes to mess with them too, though. But
Yeah, he
uh,
does.
so maybe two more questions. But Charles McCune asks, "Who are your business heroes?"
Well, I've mentioned Buffett a lot. Buffett's a business hero, but if you read his book, I've got it up there on the shelf, his biography, and you'll be like, huh, he's kind of a weird dude, like in real life. So I think you should always read your heroes' biographies. That's a lesson I've learned, because nobody's perfect. Everybody's kind of weird. So just do that. I don't think you want to put anybody on a pedestal, myself included, because we're all human beings, and we're all good at stuff, and we're all crappy at stuff. And so that's the first comment. But I've got a little. Let's see if I can turn my camera around here. I've got a board over here that has a lot of my heroes. Let's see if it's in my office here. Yeah, you can kind of see it behind the light there. I got pictures of people over there,
Ah,
and so it's something. Every time I walk into the office, I look at that. And some of the people I have on there, John Wooden, I mentioned, he's not a business leader, but he's a coach kind of hero. Believe it or not, Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers neighborhood. I read a biography by him. is a really interesting creator. Like he was a creative person, and he was a business person. He had his own, operation, but I really admire his kind of fierceness. You wouldn't think like the gentle, like kid, he was very consistent and had a fierceness about him when people like pissed him off. Like the federal government tried to pull the funding for the PBS show one time, and he went to Congress and he was like, he did it nicely, but he was intense about his vision and what his big picture vision was. I thought, that was pretty cool. I've also read a book, Benjamin Franklin. I think is probably one of my kind of early colonial heroes, and as an entrepreneur, he was the original. I did a video that didn't get me views on it one time on how Benjamin Franklin was the original fire community person, because he retired early at 41 years old through his real estate and through his printing business. Like he actually made money on Philadelphia real estate. Well, he made money in his printing business, and he had franchises in different places. And then he invested money in real estate as well. He house hacked. He had little houses next to his house, and then he sold his business to his like operator of the printing business, and he went off to be a politician, a scientist. He discovered electricity through like this kite experiment. And so I kind of see him as a hero, as someone who knew when he had enough. Like he could have kept making more money and growing bigger and being like the wealthiest person in the United States, but instead he said, I'm 41 years old and I've got a whole nother life to live. I'm gonna like say that's enough. What's next? What do I want to do next? And because he did that, he was he was one of the most important inventors, a scientist. He was one of our most important diplomats. The United States would not exist, I would argue, if he had not gone to France and negotiated with France to help have them come into the Revolutionary War. Because without France coming in and like kind of going against the British with their navy, like the U.S. it was kind of a guerrilla warfare. Like we didn't have a chance. So that's the interesting thing about history, is you like see patterns in different people. And he's one of I think the original American. He was a writer. He was an interesting thinker, also an entrepreneur and a politician as well, and got into a lot of that.
Troy Roberts asks, Chad, for new investors that are looking to maximize their cash flow, what do you recommend to ones that go self-management route? What strategy to manage property would you recommend?
Mm. Well, the more cash flow you want, I think the more business-like you want to get with your properties. So short-term rentals, I mentioned earlier, that's a business. Rent by the room, that's a business. Like if you want to maximize cash flow, that's the way to do it. But you just got to be ready to have a business. So if you're not willing to do a business, yeah, I think there's long-term. You can do long-term rentals. You can choose between lower price properties and like middle of the road properties, but I've tended to get away from some of my lower priced long-term rentals, because those are usually the older properties with a lot of maintenance, a lot of headaches. So I'm not as big a fan. I've just studied my own portfolio, and my cheapest properties have not been my best long-term rental deals. Some of them done okay too, but like I still got some trailers, and a little small trailer park in South Carolina. It's done pretty well. But I've still made more money from the land appreciating than I had from the cash flow on that trailer park, believe it or not. And that kind of blows my mind. But when I run the numbers and I look at it, like that's the case. So to make more money with cash flow, focus on more business like strategies. I would also consider lending money. Like that's something you want to like diversify away from rentals a little bit. I do a lot of notes. So whether it's like hard money loans a little bit, I also sell some of my properties with owner financing. That's a way I've increased my cash flow. I don't think that's talked about enough. So we actually did that in 2009 and 10 a lot. We had too many properties, and we tried to survive through the Great Recession, and we sold probably 15 properties on owner financing and got down payments. And we still have some of those that are still paying us right now to this day.
All right, Jen, I'm going to wrap things up with one of your questions. But like I said, if you folks can, please comment on the video after. Let Coach know how much you want to see him back here. I did put in the link to go pick up his book on Amazon. So if you haven't
Thank
picked
you.
it up yet, and also the link for his RPM course. But Jen, we'll wrap it up today with one of your questions. He says, so me and Jen have this kind of ongoing debate going back and forth, but she says, Mark, so me, thinks it's better to rent, and Jen thinks it's better to buy. She wants to know your thoughts, and she says, "Can you tell Mark that he's wrong?" Thank you.
You might both be right, but I'd have, like Mark, you live in Honolulu, is that right?
Yes.
I think if I lived in Honolulu, I would probably rent. I hate to say that. Just
Yes.
if I lived there, uh, that's not 100. That's not 100%. Like, but I've often said, like, I live in Clemson, South Carolina, so it's a pretty, I mean, lower cost area compared to Honolulu or New York. But if you drop me into to Honolulu or New York, Manhattan, I would turn into probably a renter for my residence because just the math just works out better, and I would invest my down payment and other stuff, or yes, that's the core thing. But the other thing I would do is I would try to use strategies like master lease options, basically arbitrages. I would use options. I would use a lot of creative financing strategies to try to control properties that are a lot more expensive instead of trying to go get a bunch of debt on them. That I think in general that's makes a little bit more sense. But I'm not gonna be mad at anybody for buying a house and being an owner because I get that too, and I understand it. But
Yeah.
I think that's what I would do personally.
All right, that's my mic drop right there. Huh? We'll finish. No, but Jen's in California, so she is in an
Okay.
expensive market. But of course, there's like you said, there's a lot of different variables, and buying
Mm,
a home is more of a lifestyle investment. So
yeah.
definitely, there's a lot of factors to consider. But yeah, Coach, thank you for taking this time. I hope you had a lot of fun.
Yes, for sure.
Like I
This has been
said,
awesome. Yeah, I mean, the questions here have been amazing. I don't think I've been on a live stream with this kind of fun dynamic. So really, really appreciate you. Appreciate it. You organizing it.
well, like I said, I figured most of my community already knows kind of your
Mm,
journey, so I think a
mm.
live stream would have been more fun. And so, yeah, hopefully you had fun. Hopefully we can
Yeah,
do this again. But
yeah,
everyone, please comment and have a great rest of the day.
for sure. We'll see you